Win big in 2024 with RotoBrady.com's MLB Premium Pass. It includes our preseason draft kit, 15 exclusive lineup tools, and the Team Sync platform. Get customized rankings for your specific league format. Sync your leagues with Team Sync and use your new live draft assistant. Then get customized advice for your scoring settings. Get a discount for any MLB Premium Pass using my promo code Knuckler, KNUCKLER. Just visit RotoBall.com, sign up today, and start rotoballing like a boss with the fantasy baseball season right around the corner. This podcast is also brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral link and my referral code RotoBrady. Get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus. Hop in those player prop parlay contests, free contests, paid contests coming to a state near you. That is a great platform, real fun. Check it out. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you another interlude episode of RotoBaller.com's official MMA podcast. Tap that. This is another spring alt football conversation corner. Folks, UFC Mexico City just happened last night. For my picks on any major MMA events, boxing events, go to RotoBrady at Twitter. Give me a follow. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify. And with me today to have a little conversation on indoor football, spring football, what have you. He is the director of player personnel for the Quad City Steamwheelers. Other like very diverse, interesting things on his resume. A PhD student in Chicago, COO of Jet Sports Agency. He's covered the XFL Renegades for UFL News Hub. Give it up for Omar Saulters. Omar, how's it going today? Thank you so much for being here.
No, absolutely. That was a hell of an introduction.
Yeah, we get it started with a lot of energy, man. And so first off, dude, just the Quad City Steamwheelers, and in like a very rich history of the organization that like you don't get on the surface. It's been discontinued. It used to be a part of the AF2, which was the developmental league for the Arena Football League, which I didn't even know existed before. I didn't know that it went that deep. How did you, like I see what your, current credentials are, but like what's your background that got you into this level of football?
Oh God, my story to football is incredibly different. I didn't start out working in sports. Sorry, the dogs, man. When I graduated with my master's degree out of Rockford University. When I graduated, I also played collegiate football there. When I graduated, I got a job at Arthur J. Gallagher and Co. out of downtown Chicago, and I worked that job for 2 years doing corporate consulting. So did that for a couple of years. Loved the people, loved the work, loved the company. Can't talk bad about it, but there's just something missing. I kept finding myself back in football in some circles, either writing, or I also owned a semi-pro football team that played out of the Northern Lights Football League called the Rockford Revolution football team. Used to be the Rockton Rush, but absolutely loved that team. Ran it for 4 years, had a lot of success. Absolutely enjoyed everything about it. And I found myself every time I was leaving the day job, I would go and spend all my hours doing the semi-pro stuff. So I took a drastic pay cut, probably 50-60% pay cut, to leave Gallagher at my 2-year mark, to work in sports marketing. Did that for a few months, did that for a baseball team, found out that I thought I wanted to just work in sports. I was wrong. I wanted to work in football. I did a season doing baseball, and I was not a huge fan of it. The seasons are long. It is a long, intensive process. And even though I played baseball in like grade school, middle school, high school, all that good stuff, it just didn't rapture my interest the way football did. So ended up leaving that, but I was trying to get an internship anywhere that would take me. I sent my resume to all 32 NFL teams, all the CFL teams, all the XFL, USFL teams, nothing. Never heard back, never got a whisper. So I kept looking for professional football opportunities, and I noticed I had no idea what arena football was 2 years ago. I just saw the Quad City Steamwheelers. They're a 2-hour drive from where I lived. So I just started showing up to the games and started taking notes, finding out the players, finding out the staff, learning a bit more about the game. And I just started falling in love with arena football. And I did that 2 or 3 times. And then, funny story, the GM over there, Destiny Brown, I found her contact information and hit up her a few times about this job opportunity. Like, hey, can I just work in player personnel? I'll do anything. I'll do it for free, yada, yada. She said, no, no, no. And then I showed up to one of the games and I snuck in to the back area where the players and staff were. If you kind of wear a hat and a vest, like you can kind of get in anywhere. So snuck into the back of there. And then I met the GM in person and we had a good 5, 10, 15-minute conversation. Nothing too ridiculous. I just handed her my resume. I told her to please reach out if any opportunities came. And maybe a month later, somebody vacated their spot on the organization, and I was the first call she made. And she said, let's do an interview. So I did an hour-long interview with her and the head coach, Corey Ross, where I outlined my dreams for the team, the market, the players that I could bring in, everything like that. And they ended up saying yes. So I was brought in originally as the assistant director of scouting under Corey Ross. He did majority of the scouting work. I was mostly there to help fill out his reports or push paper, make sure everything gets put in. I was more of a assistant. I didn't do much of the scouting. I was able to recruit a couple players to the team. The most notable, J.J. Holloman, former player out of Georgia and Tennessee State. I met him at the HBC Legacy Bowl, and when he just graduated, he wanted to play professional football. So I was able to sneak him on the roster, and CJ Wyndham from Middle Tennessee State. So there's a couple guys I brought on, and they did fairly well. So then that next season, I showed them like the list of 200, 250 players that I've met over the course of. I went to HBCU Legacy Bowl last year, the Reese Senior Bowl, the Podium Bowl out of Miami, just everywhere and anywhere I could go to see a player, I went. And I did that not just in the capacity of the Quad City Steamwheelers, but also I was doing consulting work for a sports agency, the Jet Sports Agency. And I was hired out for the NFLPA certified agent to go recruit athletes for him. He wanted to be the one who signed the paperwork. But he didn't. He had a couple guys in the pipeline, but nobody that was coming out this year, and he wanted to have someone do that work for him. So I was traveling around doing all that. Had a list about 250-ish players. We talked about it in that off season. Coach Corey Ross offered me the promotion to director of player personnel, where I had a lot greater of a say. Out of the 40-man roster, I've probably recruited just about half of the players coming into training camp this year. So very, very different feel. Got to bring a lot of guys that I was super excited about. Got to go to all these events wearing Steamwheelers gear and guys coming up and talking to me, which is a lot different vibe than just me wearing a polo and trying to have conversations where they don't want to have it. So had a lot of fun doing that with the Steamwheelers the last 2 years, going to the HBCU Legacy Bowl, Podium Bowl. This year I'm going to like the Big 12 Pro Day, like all these different events just to just find players, talk to them. I went to the College Gridiron Showcase both years. This year I actually got to work it instead of just be on the outside. So the last 2 years have been a ton of growth in that opportunity, but it took maybe 2 years to get in front of that door. So 2 years of just begging, calling, screening, like sending out emails, I did handwritten letters to a bunch of teams with my resume attached, just nothing. And like I said, just kind of this whirlwind happened. And I got really, really fortunate and really, really lucky to land in the opportunity I have and be able to do what I've done. Okay.
Well, dude, for people whose goal was to like send out letters and resumes and put in the grind and the work just to end up with a job in professional football, this has to have worked out as good as you possibly could have hoped for.
Yes, absolutely. But again, the big thing that I want people to be aware of, it was not an overnight thing. This was, like you said, it was the grind. It was 2 years of doing everything possible to land any opportunity. I was willing to work for free. I had all my bags packed. Thankfully, the day job that I had at Gallagher paid me extremely well, so I had a nice nest egg saved up. So I went about it in a very strategic way. I had enough money saved up where I could, and I had everything in boxes where at any given moment I could pick up and move to any city, be able to work for a team completely for free. I that's the commitment that I had and was ready and able to. And I was lucky enough to, not lucky enough, but I didn't have responsibilities such as kids or a wife at home. So I had the ability to be this kind of nomad and do wherever I needed to, wherever I could be. I was at a baseball team in Maryland for 4 or 5 months, and then I transferred back to city of Rockford, where I went to university, where I was an assistant DB coach, just working for free. Just like I said, just free with my own time, just trying to learn as much as I can about the game. So when I meet a lot of people and they ask like, how do I get in the scouting world? I tell them like it's anybody can do it, but can everybody is everyone committed to what it takes to get there? There's going to be a million rejections before you get a single yes. You have to be unorthodox. Again, I sent out emails and text messages and phone calls and everything to all the NFL, XFL, USFL, and none of that worked. I had to go in person, sneaking into the arena for a Quad City Steamwheeler game after learning about the game in order to get in front of a GM in person, have a 15-minute conversation. And then on top of that, someone had to vacate the spot on their own free will. They took a job in college, and then I was able to get the interview. So it's possible again. And like you said, it worked out as best as it can be for the opportunities that I was given. But it was a grind to get there. A lot of sleepless nights, a lot of working and watching your savings account dwindle and dwindle as you're working for free for these teams for a year to get your foot in the door. Like it was definitely a very stressful time. But again, the once you're in, you're in. Like if you whether you're into the XFL, USFL, CFL, NFL, IFL, if you can get one opportunity in one of those arenas, you're in, and then you can start really making the growth opportunities that you want to. You can really start meeting the people that you want to meet. Corey Ross has been absolutely incredible as a head coach. Destiny Brown as a GM, like they are constantly looking for opportunities for me, constantly pushing me, wanting me to meet more people, go to this event, go to this event. They have been wonderful in that aspect. And then with the Jet Sports Agency side of things, they introduced a whole different world to the sports side of it for me, like recruiting athletes, getting them to sign NFL SRAs, getting them to pro days, being there as their client advocate at pro days. There's a player that we represented last year, DJ Golot. He currently plays for Massachusetts Pirates in the IFL, just signed this year. But when he was coming out, we represented him, and we got him a mini camp with the Baltimore Ravens and the Washington Commanders. And the Ravens were on him from the very start, but I went to the HBC Legacy Bowl where the Raven scouts were in attendance, and one of the Raven scouts went to the bathroom, and I was like, this is my time, because they kind of segregated the NFL staff from us, of course, because who wants a bunch of randos going up to the NFL guys? So when he was in the bathroom, I went and washed my hands, and I was like, hey, you see that DJ Golak kid? Yeah. Oh, by the way, I represent him. Here's everything about him. Here's his highlight tape. Here's his dad. Here's everything. So please, let's talk about him. And that was one of the main scouts that advocated for him to attend minicamp. So that was a extremely fun part. Like I said, completely different than the actual team building. It's completely different than that, but it was so much fun to learn that piece. And again, the Jet Sports people, Avinsky Davis, Steve Carrillo, they are fantastic guys. They've done a lot for me. Like I said, they've paid for me to go to the Legacy Bowl to scout out stuff. They paid for me to go to the Reese Senior Bowl, the East West Shrine Bowl, the Podium Bowl, and of course, like I wasn't getting paid a salary on top of it, but they were again being able to just go to those events paid for and meet these people and network. And now I have 20 or so NFL scouts that I wouldn't say we're friends, but I know them. Like they know my name. I can text them, call them about a player. But yeah, those opportunities wouldn't come if it wasn't for Quad City and Jet Sports.
You're a crafty guy, Omar. I think that you like if you ever exit sports, I think that you would have a very promising career as a private investigator. And yeah, dude, the thing is, it helps a lot when like the IFL's prominence, I feel like, has really risen over the last. I mean, like last year was the year that I really followed week by week what was going on in the IFL, and I love the things that they do to set themselves apart. You know, like the Massachusetts Pirates are a fun team to watch. The jersey colors, the field colors, the fan experience, the players that are involved in the league. Because I mean, like, you know, I'm sure that you have followed very strongly, you know, guys like TJ Edwards who have, you know,
Yes.
a lot of interest, you know, in the UFL merger and from other professional opportunities. And so you've been in a lot of the levels of football that really interest me. And I want to go back to the semi-pro thing that you mentioned,
Yeah.
because that's something that, as someone who's like as interested in every level of football as I am, it's very hard to find information on stuff like that. And so if you could give a little insight into like when you take over ownership of a semi-pro team, what is the goal? Is it just to be involved in football? Is there actually, you know, any like, you know, financial pros to it? And what does it take? What's the difference between semi-pro and the lowest level of professional by that matter? Because that's something I think since the decline of the AAU back in the 1970s and 80s, I think that distinction of what semi-professional is has kind of escaped most of the United States.
No, absolutely. And I'm glad you want to talk about semi-pro. Most people don't want to. It was actually a fascinating story.
Fascinated.
So no, it's a crazy, crazy world in semi-pro sports. So when I was 16, I wanted to get my foot in the door at some type of sports level. So I did an internship with the Beloit Snappers, the baseball team that's 45-minute drive for me. They're called something else now, and it's gonna piss me off. It's gonna escape, and people from Beloit are gonna hate me for it. But they changed their team recently. But I did an internship with them, and then I looked for sports teams, like just Googling local sports teams near me. And then there was a team called the Rockton Rush, owned by Brian Kelly. Wonderful, wonderful man. But the Rockton Rush was a semi-pro football team, I want to say, for like 14, 15 years at that point. It was owned and operated by Brian Kelly that entire time. They competed for championships. It was really fun to be around. I joined in.
Like the Brian Kelly? Like when you say Brian Kelly,
No, sorry. A different Brian Kelly,
okay,
named after the Brian Kelly, but yeah, just Brian Kelly.
okay.
Yeah, his dad's also a Brian Kelly. It's funny, but yeah. So Brian Kelly, wonderful man. He introduced me to the world of semi-pro. I was like his little intern. I just walked around with him, and I filed the paperwork he wanted me to. Again, just doing everything I can to learn. Just be a sponge. Then year two, I showed some good graces in group ticket sales and corporate sponsorships. So I sold a lot of that for him. Then instead of losing money each year, when I joined the staff, he started making money each year. So he's like, holy hell, like I like this kid. So when I was 18, graduating high school, I became the director of football operations for that semi-pro team when I was going to college to play collegiate football at Rockford University. And I absolutely loved every second of it. I loved the recruiting players. I loved the corporate sponsorship side of things. I loved setting up the field. I would go out there with Brian Kelly, and we would set up the speakers and get the scoreboard set up. And sometimes I'd have to do scoreboard keeping. It's like a one-man operation for a lot of different things. So with semi-pro is just very interesting in the fact you have to do a lot with a little. So did that for him for another year, and then he was getting ready to retire out of semi-pro football. He had a job, his kids were getting older, he wanted to be a part of their lives more, coach on his son's football team, all that good stuff. So he decided he wanted to be done with it. So I asked him, or he approached me and said, I've had a couple people reaching out asking if they could buy the Rockton Rush for me. But he's like, I really don't trust anybody. And he's like, it's been around for 16 years and I don't want to give it to just anybody. He said, would you want to take over ownership? And I was like, Jesus Christ, like just own the semi-pro team? He's like, yep. He's like, I believe, what was it, $500 so he could recoup some of the scoreboard stuff back and like the speaker setup. But it was very negligible cost to take over ownership from him. And when I did, I brought in James Wallace. He's a wonderful friend of mine too. He owned an arena football team, not a professional one, but one called the Rockford Rams. Had a lot of success over there. Unfortunately, he had to shut it down, but he joined my staff. And we hired Willie Tolan as our head coach, who's now the head coach of a local high school over there at Auburn in Rockford, Illinois. And in our first 4 seasons, we made it to the championship game. The first 3 straight, we won our very first one in our first year, and had a lot of success very, very early on. And then once you start getting to those upper echelons of semi-pro football, you start meeting some really, really good teams. The Racing Raiders. If you don't know who the Racing Raiders are, they are the king of semi-pro football. They were supposed to be the original Green Bay Packers. They've been around for 100+ years. Their history is fantastic. They actually, if I remember correctly, and Racing Raiders, don't hate me if I got this wrong, but I'm pretty sure that they were offered the first bid in the NFL to be the Green Bay or not the state of Wisconsin's NFL team. And then they turned it down thinking, oh, what is this NFL BS? Like, we're doing just fine without them. And then they gave it to Green Bay, and they've been, and we all know the history beyond that. But Racing Raiders, they have their own stadium. The city the city gave it to them. Like, they have wonderful staff that's been there. Like I said, it's 100+ years old. Like, they have people everywhere. They got old players in every department there. It's just a wonderful, wonderful organization. And we started competing with guys like that who were competing for national championships, and we would lose to like Racing Raiders or the Rough Riders, another wonderful organization. And there's kind of like a wall that you hit, that you need either the money or the resources to kind of get you to the next epsilon where you're competing for national championships. Now I think the premier semi-pro league is GDFL, Gridiron Football League, where Racing Raiders in their first year just won it again. But I had a lot of fun owning and operating the Revolution Football. We played out of the Northern Lights Football League, still around today. They still are going very strong. Really good teams, really good ownership group. Eric Beber is the commissioner over there. I love that dude to death. But yeah, semi-pro has just been a wonderful experience for me. It taught me a lot about how to work with nothing. And I would say that's the main similarity I noticed with arena football. The big difference, of course, is the players are getting paid and you're playing out of an arena versus like a high school stadium. But the other huge part that I noticed was that arena football, you have to do a lot with a little. You only have a certain amount in your budget, and you have to recruit these players, and then you have to make them feel warm and welcome. You got to get all their bags and stuff. You got to get the corporate sponsorship dollars in. It's just at a higher scale. But you're working on a skeleton crew. You would prefer to have 5, 6, 7 employees. You're working with 1, 2, or 3. Like, it's just, it taught me a lot how to operate a football team with very little in terms of resources and money and staff. So that would be the biggest takeaway I took from semi-pro football. And the reason I got out of it was just getting when you're not paying players, you can't enforce a lot of rules. So if like guys stop showing up to practice or this, that, or the other, there's nothing I could do about it. And eventually, again, I love the semi-pro world, but I always wanted to be in professional football. And when the Steamwheelers offered me a job, I immediately disbanded the Revolution and I hightailed it to Moline, Illinois to join their staff immediately, just because I wanted to be in that next stage. Then, of course, the hope is you get promoted to CFL, USFL, XFL, or the NFL, or then if you end at the other leagues, you're going to the NFL. Like, you're always looking for that growth.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, what makes a semi-pro athlete is that they're like college athletes that are playing after they played in college. They're not getting paid. So I've got so many follow-up questions from what
Yeah, go ahead.
because so like how do you go about, scouting or recruiting players to come play for a semi-pro team? And it sounds like, you being in Illinois and there being teams across different states, how do you organize the travel, for a semi-pro team? How do you find a venue? What's it like to sell group tickets for those things? Because it's something that it's clearly just a challenge to let people know even exists.
No, that's a wonderful follow-up question. So to answer, trying to go in order, the way you recruit semi-pro football players is first of all having a great coaching staff. Great coach, and typically in order to have a very successful program, you want like local college or high school coaches from the area. Because what happens is some high schoolers, like we had a couple guys on our team that were great high school athletes, go to college, they mess up, they do something stupid, and they get kicked out and they come home. Well, now they're home working at whatever factory job, or they're working at enterprise or whatever it may be, and they still have that itch and desire to play football, and they didn't get an offer with the IFL or whatever, so they just want to go out there, play a great game and have some really good tape and hopefully have an opportunity elsewhere. But I get a lot of local athletes, and then once you start getting bigger, and having a lot of success, like when we started winning championships, now we start getting players driving an hour to come join us because they want to compete at the highest level in semi-pro football. It was just a whirlwind seeing. And then again, Willie Tolan, he ended up being the Auburn head coach, but he worked at a local college or a local high school, Boylan Catholic School, I believe on their JV team. And he just knew a lot of players. He was just really tapped into that Rockford area in terms of talent. So having a great coaching staff, and then James Wallace, again, he worked in for an arena football team, the Rockford Rams, for I want to say 3 or 4 years. So we used a lot of his players that from that disbanded team. So it's just about finding the right staff that just know the area, and then semi-pro players find it, like they just know. For example, the Rockford Revolution still have their website up. It's Rockford Revolution. I think it's revolutionfootball.org or rockfordrevolution.org. And I kept that website up because it's just a nice reminder. But I'll tell you, every single day I get an email from the contact page from a player asking to join our team. They're a local guy. They're like, I just got done with college football. I'm from Rockford. I want to play. And I get almost one a day. So, like I said, when you're just known and you show a good, rich history of winning and playing it the right way, and favorites are not a thing, and guys get clean uniforms and clean helmets, and everyone's looking sharp, it makes a night and day difference. And then for travel, it depends. Some games, if they're too far away, 6-7 hour drives, you rent the bus, and the buses are so expensive, $1,500, $2,000 a trip. So you don't try to utilize the bus too often. But what we would do is meet up at one of those gas stations that are right off the highway, and we'd all we'd all meet up as a team there, and then we'd all pile into each other's cars and then just drive as a team in everyone's cars to wherever event that could be an hour away, 2 hours away, 3 hours away, and then we drive home. So, and then for championship game weekends, you rent a hotel room, win or lose, you're going to celebrate, yada, yada. So that's how the transportation stuff is covered. It's kind of just, hey guys, everyone pile in my car, James' car, and then let's hit the road and let's get a dub today. And so that's how we recruit. That's how we travel. And then the sponsorship stuff. It was very, very interesting to try to get group sponsorship. So it's using a lot of good graces. I went to high school in Rockton, Illinois, which is like 15 minutes from Rockford, Illinois. So I got very tapped into that area at a very young age. I also had a small business, a small art company that I ran in high school that introduced me to a lot of people. I just know a lot of people from that area. So I just hit up a lot of my old contacts asking for, hey, can I get $500 for this? Can I get $250 for that? $500 for this? And a lot of them would say yes. And then the other big money maker for a semi-pro team is merchandise, selling jerseys, selling T-shirts, selling hats. I could make $1,000 a game doing that. We averaged, I want to say, at our best year, we probably had about 300 people a game, which is not horrendous. I would say like during our championship year, 500 a game. Like it's nothing to write home about, but we had our stands fairly filled and it was a really fun electric environment. Racine, like I said, top of the line, they average probably 1,000, 1,500 fans a game. So that just shows you the different, like 1,500 is probably the max you're going to see at a semi-pro game. And we were getting a third of that. So I was super happy. Like I said, the tickets, the merchandise, and the corporate sponsorships covered majority of my costs. On average, we would make, I don't know, 2,500 a year, and I would just take that $2,500 and throw it back. It would take about $7,500 to run a season, like getting guys new jerseys, paying for gas, getting the buses, hotels, helmets, all yada yada. It would be about $7,500, and then, like I said, we'd maybe make out $2,500 in profit. So. And again, I would just use that to re-up and buy guys new helmets or new jerseys, or that's our bus money for the game next year, or that's our league fee for the league this year. So that's kind of where the money goes. And then group ticket sales, you would just reach out to like local groups that you think would have some interest. There was a special needs home that had adult special needs people there that they were always looking for entertainment for them. So we would give them like next to nothing for the tickets and just have a bus of them pull up, and they would very much enjoy the game. And we get them jerseys and T-shirts and hats and have them enjoy themselves. So it's not like I can call a corporation and get whatever, like John Deere to send 1,000 employees to my game. It was much more of the local mom and pop shops. Hey, I would go to like my favorite breakfast restaurant and offer all the people there dollar tickets or whatever. So that's kind of how the group side worked on our end.
So it seems like when you're running a team at that level, it seems like no matter what, it doesn't matter if you give the tickets away for $1 or 50 cents. Ultimately, when people are showing up, that is accomplishing what you want to financially. No matter what,
Exactly.
people are paying to show up, and I don't know how the concessions work or anything like that. I don't even know if there are concessions at these games. I'm still learning about the semi-pro level, but it seems like when people show up, it's good for, it's money you're taking in, it's people that are in the seats, and it's people that are possibly walking away with T-shirts.
Yes, no, absolutely. Getting people in the stands were the best. Not just a better environment for the athletes, the coaches, but once you get them in the door, I would say on average, I had it calculated, maybe like $12 is what we averaged per player or per person that was every person that was sitting butts in seats in our stadium was worth about $12 to us because they would buy whatever, they would buy one t-shirt, or that's what I said, on average. And for food, it was actually interesting. We had to get like our Illinois licenses to have food if we were trying to sell hot dogs and pizzas. But sometimes when we didn't want to have to deal with all that stuff, we would just rent out to a food truck. Hey, there's going to be 500 people at this game. Give me up $200 and you can keep the proceeds. So we would have taco trucks at the game and all this fun stuff. So people love when the trucks came. That was definitely the highlight. They didn't like our soggy hot dogs and hamburgers that we were trying to flip at halftime. They much preferred the really nice taco trucks to come in.
So okay, and this is and then we can move on to some IFL.
Yeah,
Like one more follow up, because now the concession has my wheels turning. Is like, so let's say you wanted to provide like your own hot dogs, and I don't know if there were beer sales or anything like that in any of these.
There was previous beer sales, but I wasn't legally allowed to carry that over since I wasn't even the age of 21 yet. So the former Brian Kelly had a beer license where he would sell beer out of his like cooler, like he had beers in a cold cooler, and we had to have that as licensing because the cops would show up and say, "You're selling beer. Let me see the license." And Brian was always really good with that. But when I took over the team and went to update the liquor license, they're like, "You're 19. No, like you can't do that."
Oh my God. Well, so like if you wanted to at like any venue, and I assume like these are like either high school fields or community
Yep.
college fields that
Yep.
you're playing at. So if you supply your own food and you're just using the facilities to serve I assume that whatever the majority of the money that you take in is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why it was more beneficial to do it on our own, because you can make 3, 4, $500 a game, or like the championship game that we have as an LFL. I've worked that a bunch in the food side of things, and they would make $1,000 in concessions. So it's concessions is a good way to make money, but there's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through. If you're in the state of Illinois, you got to get your certification on food preparation. You got to make sure that the hot dogs are covered completely, because and we would have a food, because they know we did semi-pro, they would have like a cop or a food inspector show up just to make sure that we weren't serving incorrectly. Like we weren't serving with our hands. We had to use tongs. We had to do the hair nets, the gloves. Every food had to be covered. You couldn't like I couldn't it had to be what's the right word? Like the food had to be packaged. Like I couldn't go like butcher a cow and then take the meat to the stadium to serve it. It had to be, yeah. Like I said, it's a very interesting environment. It's like a backyard football feel in like an organized way. Like I said, families are showing up, they're bringing coolers, they're eating hot dogs, they're watching their dads, brothers, uncles, cousins, whatever it may be, just play football, a really good game with some high level referees, some really good coaches. It just was a lot of fun. I've seen players. The oldest player I had on my team was like 42. Like I've seen as young as 18 join our team, like right out of high school, and I've seen as old as 42. I know some team owners that still play on their semi-pro teams. Brian Kelly, when he originally started the Revolution, he was part of. There's a high school nearby, Belvedere High School, and they won a state championship in like the early 2000s. And Brian Kelly was a part of that team. So when he went to college and came back, he was like, I miss football too much. I'm going to start my own semi-pro team, joined a league. I believe it was the Mid-States Football League, MSFL. That was like the premier league at the time. And then he just brought all of his old Belvedere buddies that all played high school ball with him. And he would run everything, but he'd also be a player. So it's a very interesting environment of semi-pro football.
No, and a fascinating thing about it. So, I mean, take Rockford, Illinois. Illinois, as you know, as a whole, is a talent-rich state.
Yeah.
Across sports anyway. But Rockford. I imagine if somebody wanted to start a semi-pro basketball league in Rockford, it would be incredibly high level. And these are guys that most of us, even people like me, and I have people from the alt football world on the show a lot to talk about these things, and players and people in the personnel department. But most of us, it's not like we know a bunch of professional athletes. So on these semi-pro teams or on these, very even lower level indoor leagues that exist kind of regionally.
Yeah.
It's still the best athletes that we've ever known in our lives. If you met these,
Exactly.
like they played 4 years of community college or junior college ball, and or they bounced around a little bit and played in some like after college leagues or whatever it might be. And those guys are still incredibly talented. And when you're
Oh,
describing what it takes to run a successful team and the amount of money that it takes to run a team just year by year, it sounds like I'm thinking about the northern Kentucky area where I'm from, like just like 15 to 10 minutes south of Cincinnati. It seems like there could be 5 semi-pro professional leagues
yeah.
semi-pro leagues that could survive really well because there's so many youth football teams and local pizza places, local bars, local elementary schools that you can show up and say, hey, like give these tickets out at your guys' next thing or whatever it is. And the big battle is just getting people there because hot dogs will sell, beer will, no matter what, whether it's out of the coaches or the owner's cooler or the hot dog, that's what people expect. And it's kind of like why independent league baseball has always been a fixture in America.
Yeah. Oh,
Those
absolutely.
always sell. You get people there. People love to watch baseball performed at a higher level that they can play, and they like to eat hot dogs and drink beer while they do it.
Absolutely. No, you got it right. And these athletes, like you said, they're special. On my own team, I'll give you two quick stories. During our championship game, my first year, we had a guy, Corey Jefferson, and he's gonna love that I shout him out because he's one of my favorite players I've had. Um, he was one of the best athletes coming out of high school. I forgot what he did for college ball, didn't land anywhere pro. And he's a little older now. I want to say he's almost 30, maybe 31, 32. But during our championship game, there was a play. He was our kick return specialist as well. And I walked by him and we were down, I want to say a score at that point. And me and him would always just give each other this look, like a knowing look, like, come on, do something special. And this time when I looked at him, I said, turn it on. And he's like, I got you. And he scored a 101-yard touchdown and did all these crazy spin moves and everything. And I have chills down my spine thinking about that play because it was just such an amazing feeling. Or Jawan Parchman, he was a stud. I played against him. He mossed me in high school. Like I played against him in high school football. I was a safety. He was a wide receiver, big stud wide receiver, 6'3", 205 pounds, ran a 4.5 40. Like he was a stud. Mossed the hell out of me. And then 4 years later, he played at Illinois. I think he got cut or released for some behavioral stuff. I don't want to speak too deep in it because I don't quite know. But he played for my team, and there was one play they tried an onside kick because they needed to at the end of the game. And onside kicks, everyone just jumps on the ball and that's it. Jawan just wanted to be something special, and when the ball came to him, he ran, jumped, caught it, like hurdled the guy as he did it, and ran to the end zone to score. And it just seeing those, like you said, those types of athletes perform at a very, very high level is just super fun because some guys on the team, like you said, they're just Joe Schmoes that missed a game of football and they played it in high school and they want to see it. Some of these guys were high level collegiate athletes that for whatever reason are back home and just still have the itch to play. So those are two quick stories I have. I could tell you a bajillion of them, but those are like the two that came to mind when you're talking about the high level athletes doing their thing.
And so now to transition a little bit to the indoor football league,
Yeah,
because I touched on it. I love that you can watch them on YouTube. I love
yeah,
that the games are live. It's very accessible. I feel like it's not a stretch for me to reach out to an IFL player and get them on this show, which is a great
yeah.
thing for fans and for people that love all levels of football. And I recently talked to Evan Wilsmore of the Vegas Nighthawks.
Oh, Evan's a great guy.
Dude, and he's like kind of like you, where it's like he just wanted to do this and did
Yeah,
everything that he could to be able to do it right now. And that dude's still like a sophomore in college.
I know. Don't
Which
even give me Do not get me started on Evan. Me and him met because we both did scouting stuff and we followed each other on Twitter and we just like DM'd each other back and forth like congratulations on this, congratulations on that. And then Evan and I met at the IFL XFL camp. They did a camp together and they had a couple XFL guys at the time show up to do scouting, and that's where I met Evan. And when we were talking, he's just again, it's just like-minded individuals. Like I could tell we both really, really wanted it. But I felt I was young in the space, and I'm 25 right now. But when I first met him, I want to say I was 23, And I'm like, yeah, man. I was like, I feel like I'm doing pretty well. I just got this assistant director of scouting job at the IFL. And he's like, yeah, I'm interviewing for the assistant DPP for the Vegas team. And I was like, oh, dude, congratulations. I was like, by the way, how old are you? And he's like, oh, I'm 19. I was like, 19? What the hell are you doing? You were on the Houston Roughneck sideline last year as a reporter. Like, you were doing all this stuff and you're still in college. So hats off to Evan. I'll just do the quick shout out for Evan there because he's a great guy and he's gonna go far.
Shout out to Evan, got one of the sickest mullets in the alternative professional game.
Yes, that mullet.
And so, but dude, this is a question that like you touched on a little bit at the beginning, but I'm always fascinated by whether because there's so many leagues that I'm fascinated with all levels of pro basketball, pro baseball, pro football, and especially now that for pro football, it's expanding worldwide, in a way that we haven't seen over the last 20 years. Um, when you've got players that come to Quad City or players for any IFL team that go to Massachusetts or go to Sioux Falls to play on their team, what are the things that you as an organization have to do just to make sure that they're set up and they're comfortable and they're ready to play for your team?
Oh my God, it is extremely interesting, and I believe every team does it quite differently. So in the IFL, the players don't make a ton. I believe the league max is 250 a game. Uh, the main reason we offset that is that their medical coverage is covered when they're here. They get free housing and free food. Like that's that they can survive. It's not, like I said, it's not a great living. The way I tell players when I recruit them is that I would treat the IFL like a football internship. It is teaching you the fundamentals of how to be a professional athlete. And then hopefully with the tape that you garner, with the respect that you have with the coaches, people can make phone calls for you, and hopefully you'll get the opportunity to move up. I did an analysis of the IFL for the past 3 years, and I believe 3 years ago, it was about 10% of the league got promoted up to at least a tryout or a campfight or something in the CFL, XFL, USFL, NFL. Um, there was 3 years ago it was 10%. 2 years ago it was 12.5%. This past year, I want to say it's close to 15%. So, like you said, the IFL is just putting out a fantastic product, but in effort to make these players feel comfortable, when they fly in, we're picking them up from the airport. We're driving them. We have a Quad City. I'll just speak for Quad City. We have an apartment complex that we almost like co-own with the hockey team. Like we're the only two people that are in that building. So for 6 months of the year, it's a hockey building. 6 months of the year, it's a football building. And we put the players in a hotels for training camp. They do a week or 2 week long training camp. You do your initial cuts. You have a training camp roster of about 40. The IFL rosters are, I believe, 25 players that are on your roster before are inactive for game days. So you almost get like 4 practice squad guys. But once you make those roster cuts, you then give the guys their apartments, and it's typically a 2-bedroom apartment, and you shove 2 guys in it, and there's enough room for everybody. Local talent is really big in IFL football too. Guys that don't need housing because housing is such a big expense for IFL teams. So we have guys like on our Quad City Steamwheelers, the big one that everyone knows is Kevon Rudd, all IFL guy, big time wide receiver, did a lot of good stuff for him. He's local. So that's a huge benefit for guys to be local to the team because it really helps out on that, like I said, that cost and being able to bring in other guys for housing. So when the housing, you get guys in housing, like I said, they get, we do at Quad City, we provide them vouchers for their food. So they'll get, I don't know, at the beginning of the week, they'll get, 10, 15 vouchers, whatever the amount of meals that they need. And it'll be to a bunch of local restaurants, whether that's a Famous Days, whether that's a mom and pop breakfast spot, whether there's a bunch of places that we partner with to be able to give them that food. So they get their apartments. Like I said, that's their entire apartment building. That's just for them. They get their food. And then they have access to we have our training facility that's a big indoor soccer complex, sports complex type of thing that we do for a lot of our practices. And then when we can, for our practices in our game day, we have, of course, our stadium that's maybe a 10-minute drive from the apartment building. So it's a pretty good setup for everybody. Like I said, I wish we all could be making more money, coaches, front office staff, and players included in the IFL. It's just I've seen the budgets. It's just not there at the moment to be able to do like large increases like that. But again, the way I view it is that we're all here to get our experience, to learn our craft, to be around football, so we all can get the opportunity to move up.
And dude, like it's first of all, that is incredible just to imagine the setup and like the fact that having the apartment building and the meal voucher,
Yes,
fact that that has kept it running, because that is an amazing amount of like, of working that takes to have a setup where these high level athletes can come and buy into the fact that this could be like the step to the next thing. Because in
yeah,
football, just signing on, to getting a mini camp invite, getting a rookie camp invite, getting any sort of practice team experience could change your career for the next 10 years. Like
absolutely.
even is to be a guy that bounces around to practice squads, and you've made a fantastic living as a professional football player. And now there's all these intermediary leagues, and the UFL is kind of like, especially with the XFL business model taking over, it really and like that's a much grander discussion possibly for another time. But like it's really established itself as kind of a developmental league as opposed to AAA.
Yeah.
I think that there's a subtle difference there. And you got guys from Kentucky and at least from last year, Jared Harrington, wide receiver from Campbell
Oh,
University, Ramon Morris from Pikeville, and then you got guys who played at Virginia, Shane Simpson. You got guys
yeah.
that played at Georgia, BYU, and Baylor. The amount of like, and there was another one up here too. EJ Hilliard, the quarterback out of Valdosta State, which is
Yeah.
a very very strong program below the Division One. You got people at every level of football. And so it is amazing to have an organization where everybody has to buy into the fact that like there is a value to them being here. No matter what money you're making game by game, there is a value that if you show up here, you play like a professional and you perform well, whether you started off at a blue blood school like Jeremiah Holloman did, or whether you're at Pikesville College in Kentucky, that this could be the step to the UFL, the Canadian Football League, or the NFL, whatever it may be.
No, I'll speak to that a little bit. I got a bunch of fun stories, but I'll give you a couple. So there's an athlete, Charles Heaton III, out of SMU, played for the Frisco Fighters. He was their return specialist and did a little
No,
receiver. You know Charles?
no, I love Frisco. I love
Oh yes, yes. Frisco,
here.
Frisco. There's a lot of great people over there. I have nothing but respect for that organization. They play some damn good football and have some damn good players. But Charles Heaton was an athlete that I helped represent. Uh, he was disappointed he didn't get into the XFL, USFL, or the CFL at the time. But and I met him when he was at Frisco. But he told me a little bit about his background, and he won Special Teams Player of the Year that year in the IFL. And I told him, I said, "Hey, you give me an opportunity, we can get you somewhere, man. Like you came from SMU. I know you're 5'9", $185, but you still run a 4.3. You still like you do a lot of great things. Somebody's going to end up taking you." So when he agreed to represent with me, we sent him to we shopped him around, and he ended up signing a contract with the BC Lions. Now the BC Lions ended up releasing him before training camp because they brought back their returner, but because he had interest in the BC Lions, he was able to parlay that a deal with the Edmonton Elks. So that's just a premier example. And I love sharing Charles Heaton's story when I'm talking to these athletes, because they're like, I don't know, man. I heard guys being in the league 3, 4, 5 years. And that's true. There are some athletes there that kind of make this like their fun side job. Like they have a wife and kid at home, but they're still talented enough athletes to play. That does happen. But I would say majority of them are the guys like Charles Heaton looking for an opportunity. Like, let me go out there, let me get some better film. Let me show everyone what I can do on a football field. And he was able to parlay that to the CFL. And then we have an athlete as well that you didn't mention on our roster, Joe Crawl. Joe Crawl was out of Monmouth College, not to be confused with the Division I school. He went to the Division III school in Monmouth. Joe Crawl is a beast, absolute animal. Like he
Looks
is one of the best. He is one of the best O linemen we've ever had. He mauls people. He drags when he throws him on the ground. He's dragging his body on him. Like he's just a monster that any team would be lucky to have. But he, again, Division III school. He's got good size, but he came from a Division III school. Not a lot of NFL love. I believe he also came out during 2020 during the COVID year, so that just really ruined a lot of opportunities for a lot of athletes. But Joe, unfortunately, but fortunately, but unfortunately, he got picked up by the San Antonio Brahmas during that XFL IFL transition. He was on the roster up until I want to say 2 weeks ago when they San Antonio Brahmas did their huge 20-30 player cut. He was part of that list, and so was CJ Wyndham, who was also on our team and was also on the Brahmas. But I also use Joe Crawl. Unfortunately, like I said, he didn't get a chance to perform at the XFL level. But I also tell guys, we just got a guy on our team, Paul Fay from Wheaton College, which is a Division III school. And the big reason he ended up signing with us is he said, like, the Joe Crawl effect. Like, you guys took a Division III guy who's got good size, good film, good tape, and Joe is like the best athlete you could ask for. He's always there. He's really good in the locker room. He's just really fun to talk to, just really good guy all around. And he spent 2 years with our organization and then was on an XFL team for the longest time. Like I said, we were excited that he was able to sign, but unfortunately he didn't get to go to training camp. But again, that's just one more example of, yeah, sure, we have the Baylor guys and we have the Georgia guys, and you're going to see guys from Bama. And that's something I also tell the players when we're recruiting them, like, hey, you may have went to Wheaton, you went to Valdosta, you went to Lenore Ryan, you went to Midwestern State. You went to all these different schools, and NFL teams didn't love you for whatever reason. Not plus size, school talent wasn't enough. Like, you guys didn't play good competition. But when you're a defensive lineman from Midwestern State, you're going to line up against the linemen, especially on the teams like Frisco, Massachusetts, Arizona Rattlers. You're going to line up against a lineman that played at Bama. You're going to line up against a guy that played at Baylor. You're going to line up against a guy that played at these huge programs, Florida. There's a Florida boy that just came into my head, but you're going to play some top of the line competition. And that's the thing I don't think players or people understand about IFL football, is that this is not a bad product. Like, this is high level of football. I would say majority of these athletes could perform on a UFL or CFL roster today. That's just how talented they are. There's just not enough roster spots in the world for the thousands and thousands of athletes that could perform it. You need one person to fall in love with you, but if they don't fall in love with you and you go through the process, you need to continue to stay top of mind, get that tape, garner interest. And the way to do that is a league like the IFL. Like, I've seen some crazy names come through. First name that comes to mind last year, I believe Darius Geist played for the Las Vegas team. Only a couple of games, but that's a former second rounder. Like, that's a guy. Like, that's a stud. Anthony Russo played for Massachusetts Pirates. He was on, I forgot which XFL team. He was on it for a few weeks as a starter and ended up getting cut, but he joined Massachusetts and had a fantastic year. I'm not sure what he's up to now, but like, there's guys like there are some big names. Trevon Boykin signed with Mass, but I don't think I think he RTR'd, meaning he's not going to come to training camp. But that's what I'm saying. Like, you see some names come out and you're just like, holy hell, like, how did we get XYZ guy? Antonio Brown, even though it's not IFL, it was NAL. When he owned his own NAL team for a little bit, he was on the roster. He didn't play a game, but that's like, those leagues have guys. Like, there are guys in all these different leagues that come from Division III, Division II, Division I, NAIA, plus size, undersized, fast, slow, whatever it may be, that what you see when you're out in the field is professional athletes. Like, these guys are legit. They would compete at the UFL or CFL level today, and I'm confident as hell to say that.
And that's the thing, is that, because so many of these guys played at levels, below Power 5 Division 1 and below Group of 5 Division 1, which, the gap between that is a lot slimmer than a lot of football fans think.
Yeah.
There's this issue with scouting where it's like, there's so little difference between so many of these guys, where the difference is really the opportunity and what they're willing to put in. And it really highlights, when you got second rounders on the same roster as guys that played, community college football up in Anchorage, Alaska or something. It's like, clearly the football scouting world has yet to get it perfect. It's why there's 5 stars that don't have great college careers, and it's why there's guys that play junior college football that go on to have great NFL careers. And so it's very interesting that, like, the IFL, you're starting to see these partnerships between the IFL and the XFL and now the UFL, where there's a more defined pipeline, it seems like, in the United States now. And clearly there's the talent to fill all of these voids. And now you've got an ever-growing pipeline from Europe that is actually, it's real. And before, not too long, there's going to be a real pipeline from Japan. And there's probably a real pipeline from Mexico, limited as it might be right now. So There's spots all over the world. And the IFL, even with the AFL, making its return this year, I think that, the IFL has, really set itself apart to where if you're all IFL right now, again, I would urge anybody to go out and watch, TJ Edwards play quarterback.
Oh,
Because if you're telling me that guy could not lead a DC Defenders team, to a UFL championship game, I challenge anybody on that.
yeah. You'll see guy Jeremy Hickbottom. He just got signed with the Tucson Sugar Skulls in the IFL. He was the backup on the DC Defenders all last season. Like these guys are, like you said, they're TJ Edwards could go lead an XFL or UFL or CFL team today. It's unfortunate because he was part of those San Antonio Brahmas cuts. Uh, we had, I don't know, 6, 7 IFL guys from that San Antonio Brahmas cut that didn't end up making it. Some got opportunities in the CFL, thankfully. But like you said, these guys are guys. TJ Edwards, when he plays, he's electric. There's guys on our James Simpson, our running back last year. He joined halfway through the season, had a monster half of the season. I think he ended up second or third in rushing yards and touchdowns and all those stats in half the games that everyone else played. Like these guys are legit athletes. Like you said, they come from Virginia. They have plus size. Like some of these guys, when I see them, I'm like, how did you end up here? Because you got the right size, you got the right speed. You came from Virginia Tech. You came from these big programs. Like I said, BYU, Tavita Monga. Like that dude's a stud. Like he big old dude that is I love Samoan players, and he is like just watching those types of guys go at it. Like you're just like, how? Like what happened? What process happened that allowed you to come here? And there's you'll hear a million different stories. You'll hear stories of got in trouble at school in their senior year. You'll hear stories of they came from a bad program, whatever, Division 3 school, Division 2 school, and no one's going to take a look at them. I saw a lot of players in 2020 get screwed due to that very weird year of COVID with scouts because they weren't doing pro days. They weren't doing like events like the combine. Everyone's wearing like it's hard to gauge that level of talent when you're only looking through a lens that big. So like I said, I adore the IFL and all of its players and all the coaches. And there's some amazing coaches in the league. Like I said, Corey Ross, I love my head coach. If you ever want to do some research, look up some of his tape for the Baltimore Ravens. He was a running back for Nebraska. He's 5'7", 5'6", like 200 something pounds back in Nebraska. This little bowling ball just trucking through everyone. Zach Taylor was his quarterback at the time at Nebraska. Like watching that he's a super high talented guy, played for the Baltimore Ravens, I want to say 3 years as a UDFA guy, just a guy that grinded it out. Then he played some CFL ball, I believe some AFL ball maybe. He just bounced around until he landed in coaching, and he's been a fantastic coach ever since. You got guys Marvin Jones with Tulsa Oilers. That dude was a former 4th overall draft pick in the entire NFL draft, I believe, for the New York Jets in 1997. I want to say, don't quote me on that, but you get like these coaches are big time guys. Like these coaches were, a lot of them were former NFL players, were guys that have been around the league for there's just so much talent in that league. I was confident. I've said this to scouts, and I'll say it again, that if you made a new UFL team or a new CFL team, and all you did was pull coaches, front office staff, and players from the IFL, you would make a very, very, very good football team. I'm not sure if they're winning championships. I don't want to speak on that, but if you got TJ Edwards and EJ Hilliard as your quarterbacks, and you got like they said, the JJ Holloman wide receivers, or Kentrez Bell from San Diego State, who won the Triple Crown last year, Shane Simpson at running back, Joe Crawl is your guy. Like there's so many players in this league that you can make a fantastic team, and I'm very confident to say that they would compete and probably do very well at the next level. And there's front office staff all over the IFL that is incredible. Yeah, like you said, you got guys like Evan and me doing director of player personnel work. Like there are guys in there that could make a whole team and it'd be very successful.
And, like we've covered so much of what it takes probably to run a financially successful, as much as that is possible, IFL team, because so much of that I'm sure there's a good amount of overlap with some very strong differences between the semi-pro level and the IFL. I assume it comes down a lot to selling tickets. And like the IFL, it's a very strong business model in that, like, there will always be arena football leagues that come and go because there's
Yep.
people involved in the business of them that maybe shouldn't be. And
Yeah.
like, I mean, I'm sure you can
No,
attest.
dude.
And because we saw the Albany Empire disappear,
Yep.
and despite how strong of an organization that was. And it's like, but if you have a venue that you can show, have people show up to, maybe it's the University of Green Bay's basketball arena or whatever it
Yeah.
may be, and people show up, and there's kids that are getting free T-shirts, and you're throwing out different things. Players are coming out and signing an autograph poster, at the end of it, stuff like that. People are buying beer. There's if you get people to show up, you can continue to do this for a while. But as you said before, there's just a lot more resources you're dealing with once you get to the IFL level.
Yeah, I would say, like, for example, I don't want to speak to everyone's books, but I would say on average you need about $1 million to operate an IFL team for a year. So, like you said, you're still doing the same running around. You're still operating on the same skeleton crews as the semi-pro. It's just 2 more extra zeros. Instead of $10,000, you're dealing with $1 million. So, there's just, yeah, like I said, you see some teams that have 5, 6 employees, and you see some teams like Quad City where there's 3 or 4 employees that do majority of that work. So it is, you're gonna find a lot of creativity. I would say it's very similar to like independent baseball. Like you said, like they just have to do so much in terms of like marketing opportunities, corporate sponsorships. Like you just need to put butts in seats. Baseball does it a million miles an hour because there's so many games in a season. You have 2, 3 games in a week. But IFL, we have what, 18 games? Like total, like 18, 19, 20 games total if you include playoffs and everything. So that's a very full schedule. We play from the second week of March to the first week of August. Like that is a long time to be running football. And like you said, like stadiums aren't cheap, players aren't cheap, housing's not cheap. So that all has to come from somewhere. And majority of the teams you'll find make up for it. First is corporate sponsorships by far. That is what makes up majority of that income for a team. Second's you're going to be your ticket sales, and third's going to, which includes your group sales, your suite sales, all that good stuff, and then it's that merchandise aspect as the next part. So those are like kind of those 3 tiers that you'll see tackled, and people go about them so many different ways. Some teams bring on 2, 3 interns that are just hitting the phones. Some people have just been engrossed in the area for so long they can just make a couple phone calls and reconnect with their old buddies and get $5,000 here and $10,000 here. You'll see a lot of different ways. There's not one way to run an IFL team, but there are a million different ways. It's just finding what's successful and what works for you. Because what works for the Quad City Steamwheelers is probably not going to work for the Arizona Rattlers or the Frisco Fighters.
It's all amazing and beautiful, man, because it's all just grinding and effort for a bunch of people that want to work in sports and for people that want to continue to play sports and see if they can take their career to the next level. And it's just, like there's so much with so little, like, that is promised or guaranteed for you on the next day. But it's people that want to keep whatever their dream might be alive. And it's
Exactly.
effort to keep it happening. It's amazing that we live in a world now where you can sustain all these things, and like, as an example, if I wanted to run a semi-pro, basketball team in the Northern Kentucky area, you get a couple of high school gyms that you can play at, on the weekend. You sell tickets for, for $3 at a foldable table outside the gym, on a day, and like you can make that happen, and you will get high level athletes that are looking to, maybe put their name back out there. And
No,
folks,
absolutely.
if you're in Illinois, get your season tickets, get your single game tickets, your premium tickets, book your birthday party at the Quad City Steamwheelers. Because that's the other thing that is great about, indoor football and arena football too, is the affordability aspect.
Yes.
There's so many families that you can have a complete year of entertainment for you and your kids by having season tickets and an indoor football league team, and it's affordable for a large range of people. And that's something that I think that the XFL did wrong as opposed to the USFL at the beginning, was kind of the ticket prices, and it was a little bit more of a premium thing, and you toe a hard line when you're a league beyond the premier professional league in the world, and you're trying to get people to pay a certain amount to come to your games.
Absolutely. Some of the season tickets, I believe, for Steamwheelers, and Destiny's gonna be so mad if I get this wrong. I believe $10 for some of our season ticket, like $10 a game, for some of the higher level seats. Like you said, like I've worked it out before. If you take a family of 4 to a game, it's going to be just as expensive to take them to the movies. Like, and me, I'm such a big football fan. I would rather watch 3 hours of professional football. Arena football too is just such a fun game to watch because it's fast moving. The scores are 53-47. Like
Special
there's a
teams is relevant, you know, and special
yes.
teams is something that is feels like it's less and less relevant at the high level of college football and the NFL.
Oh my God, some of the kickers in our league are just insane because we do a deuce in IFL football, which means if you on the kickoff, if your kicker can kick it through the uprights on the other side, you get 2 points. But that's like a 60-yard field goal. That ain't easy.
So they're all trying to
Like
miss it because that's their
exactly, exactly. Some teams we played at God, I forgot the kicker's name for the Iowa Barnstormers. Fantastic kicker. Really, really one of the best in the IFL. He had, I want to say, 16 points during one of our games by himself. He kicked like 6 deuces in a row. I was so mad watching this kicker kick 60-yard field goals 6, 7 times in a row. And you're just like, what do I do? Like, I can't stop him. Like, you can't rush the kicker. You can't block that. Like,
I feel like it was even a game this year between like Iowa and like Massachusetts or something like that that I was watching that ended up being like 4 back-to-back touchdown returns like on back
yes.
plays, and it was like it's like damn man, this is like a kind of football that like the NFL. You know, you see special teams become less and less relevant, and you find that the rules of football are becoming less and less conducive to success on special teams. It's been something that for a safety reason, apparently, at a bunch of different levels, they're trying to kind of weed out of football. But
Yeah.
and you know the accuracy of some of those things aside, it's a great part of the sport with a lot of really good athletes that are very specialized in this sport that I feel like are very well showcased in the IFL.
Yeah. Kicker's name is Gabriel Rui. That was gonna piss me off if I didn't mention that. Shout out Rui. But special teams in the IFL is so much fun to watch. Like you said, there's probably 2 to 3 kick return touchdowns a game, or at least huge breakout ones that they're getting tackled at the 5 yard line. Like special teams is so prominent. And like I said, a good kicker could really make or break your team. I remember we've always had great kickers, but our championship game, I wasn't on the team yet. I remember watching this live when the Quad City Steamwheelers were playing against the Northern Arizona Wranglers. I want to say 2 years ago now in the championship game, 3 years ago in the championship game. At the end of the game, there was 30 seconds left, and we were down 2 points. And we really needed that deuce, and it bounced off the upright, and we didn't get it. So, like I said, he was a wonderful kicker, did great that year. I'm not throwing him under the bus or anything, but that's an opportunity where, damn, like if you got a kicker that's automatic, like a Gabriel Rui or Mass's kicker, I forgot his name, but he's a wonderful kicker too. If you got some of those extra special guys that can boot it 60 yards every single time, that's a huge difference maker. And I love seeing the strategy behind it because arena football, or I shouldn't say arena, IFL indoor football, it has elements of the CFL with the 2 traveling wide receivers that can go in motion. There's so many different ways. I love seeing the strategy behind some of the offensive minds in the game. It puts a lot of pressure on the defense because there's some things you can't do. Defensive linemen can't line up outside of the tackle, like they can't attack the guard at an angle. They have to be head up on him. So the defense has a lot of work that they have to do to keep up to it. On average, last year, the if you could get 3 stops, just that. And when I say stops, I mean make them kick a field goal. If you can keep them out of the end zone on average 3 times a game, you could win a football game. That's
Wow.
it. Like that's it. Like the defense has such a harder time, but again, you see some creative minds in the coverage, back end, some like for example, the blitzer, you have to announce that you're blitzing before you can go. So they know, but there's different creative ways that people go about it. DBs aren't allowed to have outside or inside shade. They have to line up head up on the wide receiver if they're on the line with them. Like there's just so many little elements to the game that it reminds you of the NFL, it reminds you of the CFL, but it's its own thing too. And watching some of our great minds in the game right now go about it, you see the little tic tac toes. I love doing film sessions with Corey Ross because he just has a wonderful mind for this game. I know he could be an OC in the UFL and the CFL, but watching him as a head coach of our team dial up plays is just so much fun because again, it's just football, but 1 or 2 extra new things that just make it more exciting.
Well, Omar, I think we're gonna have to be in touch this year because I would love to have some Quad City Steamwheelers on this
Oh yeah,
as well. Omar, we've been talking for a little over an hour, and yet
perfect.
we didn't even really talk about the UFL merger. That's okay, man, because that's all
Yeah.
we've been talking about this whole off season. I was excited to talk about the indoor football league, and as I found out, semi-professional football in general. But Omar, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really glad that we were able to, work this out and get this episode out today. If there's anything else that you want to say or anybody you want to shout out, the floor is yours.
No, I think I did all the shout outs I needed to. I'll shout out you because this was a fantastic interview. If anybody needs to do an interview, it's been a fantastic job. I didn't even notice an hour went by. I've just been on the back porch watching my dogs play, and I feel like I'm talking to a buddy at the bar about football, and it's always such a great feeling. So I'll shout out you for that, and get ready for some Quad Cities Steamwheeler football. I'm super excited to watch the season. A lot of guys that I personally recruited are going to be on the team this year, so excited to see what that happens. And I'm excited for every opportunity that comes my way. I hope you'll see me in the NFL one day.
Folks, keep an eye out for him. Omar Saulters, keep a lookout for the Quad City Steamwheelers in the IFL this year. People say the football ended after the Super Bowl. They could not be more wrong. Five or six leagues are going to be kicking off here in the next couple of weeks. Folks, thank you so much for listening to another interlude episode of RotoBallers official MMA podcast. Tap that. We just did UFC Mexico City last night. We've got another UFC event, more MMA action coming up this week. Again, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady for that. Follow the podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify at Tap That MMA Podcast. Have yourselves a great week. Thanks for listening and peace.